from unsolved crimes to people who simply disappeared from the face of the earth. In this video, I'll be covering disturbing unsolved cases with video footage. I don't need to say it, but viewer discretion is advised. And I'm Sir Chris. I explore the internet and I make videos about it. Let's go. Michaela Bailey. The case of Michaela Bailey is sadly the case of a teenager that went missing despite having a lot of footage. Michaela Niebergel, or better known as Michaela Bailey, was a 16-year-old teenager who was born in Regina, but later moved to Yorkton, Canada. On April 12th of 2016, what seemed like a normal morning ended up becoming the biggest nightmare for her family. And just one morning, Michaela disappears and is never seen again. One day before she disappears, Michaela had made several comments to her friends and ex-boyfriend about being sad and needing help with something. But not what she needed help with, we don't know, and probably never will. She also talked about going on vacation to Regina and about two boys, one of whom lived in the United States, would come to visit her since his mother lived not far from her town. But that never happened. That boy, later confirmed to be Christopher, after being interrogated, confirmed that Bailey had suffered from a few years back, but at the time of her disappearance, there was no evidence or behavior that showed Michaela to be. Could that make her want to disappear? Probably. But now what happened to Michaela on the 12th of April still baffles investigators. That day, Michaela sent a message to Oksana, her friend, asking if she could take her to a bank at 6:41 AM, which never happened because the bank was closed. At 8:08, Michaela's grandmother drops her off at school. At 26, Michaela leaves the school, and at 51, she arrives at the bank before it opens, in which the camera catches her talking to someone on the phone. But the strangest thing is that later, the police discovered that there were no call records, which means that they could only have been made through applications. Now which ones, we don't know. At 8:55 AM, she withdraws $55, and at 9 AM, she tries to sell a silver ring at Terry's Pawn and Bergen, in which she was unsuccessful. At 9:11 AM, Michaela is seen at Tim Hortons buying a drink and leaves around 9:22 AM, only to come back again for some reason at 10 AM, still talking with someone on the phone. Mysteriously, there, Michaela asks a lady if she could help her rent a room, to which the lady said no. Why would she need a room? Maybe the person whom she was talking to told her so? A lot of questions, but yet no answers. At 11:35 AM, she leaves Tim Hortons, and at 11:59 she returns to school, talks to a group of students for a few minutes, and leaves again. One of said students said that she had two cell phones, and that Michaela had told them that she was going on vacation to Regina. With that, at 12:02 PM she leaves school, this being the last footage of her. The police confirmed that there was a bus depot employee who had seen Michaela there between 10 AM and noon, asking what time the buses leave. But after saying 5 PM, Michaela refused to buy a ticket and allegedly left at around 1 to 1:45 PM, never to be seen again. And the last time her cell phone was on was at 7 AM the next day, probably running out of battery. The most disturbing thing is the fact that even with all of this information, the police still haven't been able to find her. And despite being against all odds, her family is still holding on to hope that Michaela is still out there.
Michaela, know that you are loved. Honey, never give up. I will never stop searching.
Elizabeth Barraza. Elizabeth Barraza was a woman who lived in Tomball, Texas, in which at 6 AM, her quiet neighborhood would wake up to a horrible incident. Elizabeth Barraza was born and lived in Elk Grove Village in Illinois. At university, she met her future husband, Sergio Barraza, in which they both married in 2014, and in 2016, the couple bought a house in the city of Tomball. Everything was going well for the couple. Both were huge Star Wars fans who loved to cosplay, be it for Comic-Con or to help support sick children in the hospital. 3 years later, to celebrate their 5th anniversary, they decided to go on a trip to Orlando on January 27th of 2019. For that, Elizabeth decided to hold a garage sale to free up space and make a few extra bucks. With that, one day before the garage sale, Sergio and Elizabeth end up putting some signs in the neighborhood, meaning only those who live or pass by there would know. But what would be a simple garage sale turned into the darkest day for her loved ones. That same night, strangely, there was a black Nissan Frontier 4x4 passing near Elizabeth's neighborhood at around 2 AM, but eventually left. At 6:08 AM, Liz ends up going to Starbucks before the garage sale. She returns 8 minutes later and starts preparing the garage sale together with Sergio. Later, That same black Nissan appears again near the school, which was not far from the couple's home, at 6:47 a.m., the time at which the couple had just finished preparing the garage sale. At 48, Sergio leaves in a white panel van to go to work, and almost 4 minutes later, the Nissan is seen in Elizabeth's neighborhood. The driver stops the car, goes to Liz, in which a small conversation happens, before the suspect fires 4 rounds, thus taking Elizabeth's life, and drives away from the scene. After what happened, in a span of 5 minutes, 3 calls were made to 911. In one of them, the perpetrator at 6:55 a.m. had returned and left the neighborhood again, thus giving the information about his model. And 3 minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. Even though she was taken to the emergency room, she would be declared dead at 1:30 p.m. the next day, but she would never be forgotten. This incident received a lot of news coverage, and a GoFundMe was created in order to raise money for a memorial service and for the reward and exchange of information that would lead to the arrest of the suspect. This incident ended up being more shocking due to Liz not having any known enemies. Despite several conspiracies, efforts, and investigations, to this day, the perpetrator has not yet been found. Shelby Thornburg. This case just reinforces the danger of meeting people online. Shelby Thornburg was born in Deckard, Texas on August 18th of 1995. Shelby had a horrible childhood. Her mother was an alcoholic and did not take care of her daughters, which resulted in both being taken from her and being placed into the foster care system. Both were with Shelby allegedly being by her father when she was young. Both stood together despite the horrible childhood, and as the years progressed, things finally seemed to be going well. Shelby had lost 81 kilos after several years of suffering from obesity, was in a relationship, and was working towards her dream of becoming a model. At the time, her next goal was to have 2 surgeries, for which she needed extra money. And so, Shelby started working as a high-end escort, which of course her sister knew and didn't approve. But despite warning her, Shelby promised to take extra precautions to remain safe, even promising to call her after the services. From the outside, Mark was her boyfriend, but in reality he was her pimp who had a previous record of promoting Shelby allegedly promoted her services on Backpage, a website similar to Craigslist that was shut down by the FBI in 2018. On November 14th of 2015, Shelby received a message from a man who wanted to hire her for one night. Both reached an agreement where the man would go to her apartment called the Conquistador. This man arrives at 8:34 p.m. at the building and heads towards the elevator to her room. At 8:40 p.m., Shelby texted Marcus with the keyword good to say that everything was fine. But little did they know that would be the last time that Shelby was seen alive. In that silence, 22 minutes later, the suspect is seen leaving the hotel. Marcus, seeing that Shelby wasn't responding, entered the apartment at 10 p.m., only to find a grisly crime scene. What exactly happened inside of Shelby's apartment is still a mystery. Minutes later, detectives arrived and started to investigate. And trust me, do not search this. Despite the boyfriend being the one who stayed with her the most that day, there was not enough proof to connect him to the death of Shelby. By analyzing the scene, they discovered that before the killing, both had intercourse, and the autopsy confirmed that Shelby had lost her life by having her throat slit. The suspect bought a burner phone with cash, which was deactivated right away after the incident, didn't left any or a lot of fingerprints, and was not from Houston. But this is where they reached a dead end. A lot of theories exist, such as him being a hired hitman or a serial killer with a preference for blonde women, but this case tragically remains unsolved. What bothers me the most is that he was only wearing glasses, and yet nobody could identify him. Missy Beavers. Terry Missy Beavers was born on August 9th of 1970 in Graham, Texas. In 1998, she ended up marrying Brandon Beavers, and they both had 3 daughters. After having them, Missy fell in love with fitness and the life-changing benefits that it brought, to the point of becoming a fitness instructor for Camp Gladiator. Missy used to have her classes outside Creekside Church, but sadly that would come to an end when Missy would be found lifeless inside that same church by one of her students on April 18th of 2016. One day before this incident, as there was a severe storm affecting Texas, the fitness class on the 18th of April was going to take place inside the church at 5 a.m. When the day arrived, Brandon was out of town fishing in Mississippi, one of his favorite hobbies. Later that alibi being confirmed. Unreleased footage says that Missy entered the church at 4:18 a.m. to prepare for the class that was going to happen at 5 a.m. But little did she knew that she was not alone. Because that same night, intentionally or not, a suspect dressed in police-like equipment chooses that church as his target and breaks in 18 minutes before she arrives. The suspect is seen walking calmly through the hallways, breaking glass and entering rooms, as if he was looking for something, until he eventually came across Missy. One of the things that is still a mystery is the gender of the suspect, but when Missy's students arrived at 5 AM, they came across her lifeless corpse and immediately called 911. The autopsy confirms that the cause of death was damages to the head and chest. When reviewing the footage, they say that the suspect was estimated to be 5'2" to 5 feet 7 inches tall, walking as if he had a wound on his right leg or foot, but that also may have been caused by the weight of the equipment. When things seemed to be reaching a dead end, new evidence appeared. A recording of a grey Nissan Altima, which on that same night was passing suspiciously through the empty parking lot of a gun store, on the same street as the church at 1:58 AM was shown. However, this couldn't be confirmed due to the church's outside cameras not working. Police believed that Beavers was targeted, especially because she would post where and when the classes would take place. And all the damages was a way of faking a robbery, since nothing was taken from the church. Interviews with Missy's husband says that he truly believes it to be a wrong place at the wrong time situation, due to her not having any known enemies and her being a godly woman. But sadly to this day, this case sits in a bounty of $150,000 for information that would lead to the arrest of the perpetrator, and the police is still actively looking for the suspect.
She was an exceptional wife.
Where do you go from here?
I don't know.
The Bunny Escobar, a recent case that will forever haunt Mexico. The Bunny Escobar was an 18-year-old woman who was found lifeless in a water tank at a time when several women in Mexico were disappearing at an alarming rate. On April 8th of 2022, the Bunny goes on a night out with two friends. The group ordered a taxi using the Didi app. They make a stop at the Simon Bolivar store, where the group is seen buying a bottle of vodka and heads towards a party. After a few empty parties, the group calls a new taxi driver, Juan David, to take them to another party. As it was getting late, Yvonne, one of the friends, took his number for convenience and went out to the party. Now this is where things start to get strange. 10 minutes after entering El Diamante, the Bunny, for an unknown reason, leaves to go to the outside pool, but then quickly returns. Around 3 AM, the Bunny, who at that point had drank a lot of vodka, allegedly starts shouting, locking herself in the man's bathroom, and starts making a scene. Yvonne, at that moment, sent a message to Juan, asking him to come and pick her up. At 3:45 AM, the same CCTV camera outside captures a conflict between the Bunny and a male before another group comes to defuse the situation. Although, the footage gives a lot to question. 9 minutes later, Juan finally arrives and the Bunny gets in the car and Yvonne tells the taxi to drive her home. Now a thing that I don't understand is, why would her friends let her go inside the taxi alone, especially knowing that she was angry drunk? However, 24 minutes later, both were seen not that far from El Diamante by a CCTV camera, seemingly having a discussion of some sorts. In an interview, Juan confirms that at that moment the Bunny was speaking nonsense and he wanted to know the location of her house, but the Bunny, drunk, of course refused. Then Juan continues driving and stops on her orders on the Laredo Highway, or better known in Mexico as the Highway of Death, as several dangerous activities happen on that same road, where the Bunny exits. Juan, worried, tries to convince her to come back, especially since it was late and they were in a dangerous area. And at 4:25 AM, the most infamous photo of this case was taken and sent to Yvonne, along with audios saying that she refused to come back, and outside the car, the Bunny was no longer his responsibility. He couldn't do much, and so Juan left. Juan, the next afternoon, at 2:54 PM, asked Yvonne where her friend was, only to receive a disturbing answer. They haven't found her. After being declared missing, the only footages that might lead the detective somewhere were those of the Bunny going down the highway to ask Alcosa, a transportation company, for help, sadly to no avail. The footage of her running into the Nueva Castilla motel, where she was seen by the abandoned restaurant camera, going to the garden for 20 minutes, only to come back and disappear. With very little evidence, the Bunny's father accused Juan of touching her inappropriately and being tied to her disappearance. But after being questioned by the police, he got released. The motel area was analyzed 5 times, and only on the last, they decided to investigate the motel's water tank, due to an odor reported by the employees. Where there, they found Bonnie's lifeless body, who had been underwater for 14 days. During the search, police found another 2 bodies of women who were also missing and the remains of 5 others. The first autopsy ruled it out to the public as nothing more than an accident, but either because of incompetence or something else, they were wrong. The family, not believing the story, requested a second autopsy, which then revealed that the body was physically and murdered before being dumped inside the water tank. This case sparked hatred amongst the Mexican citizens, and several protests were brought to the streets to raise awareness of the growing femicide problems that have been haunting Mexico since the 90s, with police doing little to almost nothing to stop it. And almost 3 years later, the perpetrator hasn't yet been found. A YouTuber that mysteriously disappeared. Kenny Veach, known on YouTube as Snakebit McGee, was a content creator whose hobby was extreme hiking and Shark Tank. That same hobby gave Kenny an experience he would never forget. He wrote a now deleted comment in an Area 51 video about the mysterious cave in the shape of an M that he had found in the Mojave Desert, that apparently was so eerie that it scared him away. That comment quickly gained a lot of attention, and curious people started to encourage and even tease him to come back, which he did. Kenny would go on his second trip to find the cave, thus posting the M Cave Mike video on October 18th of 2014. In said video, he explains that he didn't previously explore the cave since he didn't have a gun, but now he was more than ready. He tries to find the M Cave, but unfortunately fails and ends up returning. With a sour taste in his mouth, Kenny posted the video and received comments provoking him to come back, and also worried comments, with Kenny even noticing that comment. But despite that, Kenny was obsessed and determined to find that cave just one more time. This time he brought more supplies, his gun, and his phone. Before leaving, he tells his girlfriend, Sherion Pilgrim, about his plan and the intention of just staying there for 2 days, but didn't specify more than that, being this the last time Kenny was ever seen again. The search wouldn't be successful at all, because investigators were only able to find his phone that was on top of the old mine shaft seen in his video. And this is where theories arrive. Of several, the strongest is the darkest one, due to the comment left by Sherion. The comment is bigger than I would be comfortable with, so I'll quickly break it down. Sherion tells us that in the last year before he went missing, Kenny had left his job to follow his own path as an inventor, something that he was pretty good at, and thus explaining the Shark Tank videos, which sadly didn't go too well, and he was running low on money. That, plus the depression of his failed choice and his father's suicide when he was 20, put Kenny in a bad situation, to the point where Kenny would have a conversation with Sherion, saying that if one day he would take his life, no one would find him. Worried about his mental state, Sherion reached an agreement that if Kenny didn't call her for a total of 5 days, she would call the police. Sherion believes that he left his cell phone on top of the mine shaft seen in the video so he couldn't be tracked, and believes that he intended on going on that walk simply to do that, so much so that he had left the camera at home. He never intended on recording anything at all, and this is where it ends, or that's what you would think. Because an interview with Kenny's ex-sister-in-law, Susan Veach, gave us a different perspective that opposed what Sherion had said, like the possibility that he took his life, since that was totally against what he believed in, the fact that he was running low on money, or that he was going to lose the house. No lien was put on the house until the end of 2017, which means that someone was paying for the house. And even without a job at the time, Kenny was about to get into one, and no matter where he went to, Kenny always took his camera with him. And the last definite proof for Susan, the recording of someone breaking into Kenny's sister's shop who looked oddly similar to Kenny in 2018, and even had the same problem on the same knee as Kenny did, plus the fact that Sherion only reported Kenny on the 17th of November, 5 days after he went missing, which is extremely weird. But now, we are left in the middle of 2 perspectives, but still, to this day, his whereabouts are unknown. Rest in peace to all the victims in this video, and let's keep hopes up for the missing ones. If you watched the video to the very end, YouTube really thinks that you will like this one. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporter Pawn, and you viewer, for watching to the very end, and take care my friend.